Evening.
Good evening. How is everybody tonight? I'm going to quickly share this to some other Facebook pages. I'm waiting for it to pop up on Think Differently Academy Facebook.
So we will just say hi and some fun news as you guys jump on our app that we have talked about. This is a pathway to freedom. Okay, there we go. Sorry. The app that we've talked about, let me grab a phone. And we were able to open up the Buddy Boss to the silver subscribers, which is Buddy Boss is our Think Differently community social media platform. And I'm trying to pull this up right now. And so our app is actually now open to silver subscribers. So if you weren't able to get on as a silver subscriber last week, you are able to do it on the app this week. So you can go down here, click on Topical Tuesdays, and it should take you to this video. So we are super excited. I'm waiting. Aha, there it is. This video. Open to silver subscribers.
Wow.
And I'm going to close it up. So now it is silver subscribers. It is live on the app, and you can do all of your social media. You can forget Facebook. You can forget Twitter.
If you hadn't already forgotten Facebook. Or Meta, or whatever it's called.
Yeah. You can move on over to Think Differently Academy and join it and pop on. Good morning, Beth.
Hey, Beth.
And we say good morning to her because she's an Aussie.
And we've been talking to our tech guy about making sure all this is available to you in Australia. So we have not forgotten you, Miss Beth.
And any other countries, I think we need to open up as well.
Yeah. So, by the way, thanks for waiting for a moment for me while Polly was talking, because I was sharing to all of my Facebook pages, which is weird that I have so many, but I do. So, because the thing that's super important to say to you guys right out of the gate is there's only 3 more weeks of this video being on Facebook and YouTube, and we will move it completely over to the Think Differently Academy platform. And so we want to make sure we get that word to as many people as possible so that you can start figuring out how to get there. Among the reasons why we made the silver available to everybody and the app available to the silver is so that people all around the world can watch this video on the app. And because it will be on Think Differently Academy. Hey, Alicia, how are you?
Hey, Alicia.
I saw a comment you made on Facebook today. Now, I shouldn't have said that because I don't remember what it was, but it's an awesome one. And now I hope I got that right. Anyway, so we will be moving March 1st, these videos, these Tuesday night classes, exclusively to the Think Differently Academy platform. So between now and then, we're going to try to make sure that all of the Facebook pages here, we are moving. And so you'll need to download the app if you haven't done that. And if you do that, that should be enough to get you access to this video.
Yes. So Rose, are you on the app right now or the website? Because I just commented. I'm seeing the old comments from the 6th. Or that was on the 6th. Okay, that's from Janice. And then on the 1st, I guess, was our first class. I'm now just seeing those comments on this video stream. So I know our tech guy is trying to figure this out of how to get the comments up. So
is that Abby that commented there?
Yeah, but that is
a week ago.
From a week ago.
She just commented here. Hello,
yes.
Abby.
Hi, Abby.
And Dan. Hey, guys.
Hey, Dan.
Rose, Heidi.
Rose and Heidi. So glad you guys are here.
You guys all jumped on fast while we were taking care of business.
And Janice said, okay, so we'll get all this figured out. So if you don't mind commenting, if you're on the app, so I can chat on Facebook, but not the app. Okay, we will. All
right, we're working
figure
on those
all
things.
That out. Yes.
That's what the month of February is for, so that we can really get all those details ironed out. So all that feedback's super helpful to us, and we have a super responsive tech team all around the world.
Yes.
And so they are working on taking care of that stuff. We, hey, Eliza, how are you?
Hi. And then Beth, that's what you're getting as we have experienced an issue. Please try again later. Okay.
Okay. We are working on taking that issue away, Beth.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We help people with their issues, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and by the way, I'm assuming everybody can hear because people are responding. We are also still using our new microphone, which I think makes things better.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, I had a fun opportunity today.
Yes. Ooh, so excited.
Not sure when it comes out, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Debbie Silber, Silber. She is a specialist in post-betrayal trauma. So for people who've experienced betrayal, she did her doctoral dissertation on post-betrayal trauma and is the founder and head of the Post-Betrayal Trauma Institute. I think I said that right. And so I had the opportunity to teach a masterclass for their institute today. And I'm not sure when that shows up on the platform, but I know that that's available to the people who are a part of her community. And so, good. Sound and picture. Thanks, Dan. Sweet. Appreciate that. So that will come out on her platform under the heading Masterclass. And then there's an invitation to come back and do a podcast.
Okay, Jim. Thank you. Okay, it seems there's an insufficient bandwidth. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Working on all that stuff. Yeah. I want to launch into tonight's stuff.
Yes, and just real quick, I'm very excited about the masterclass.
Yeah,
it's going to be good. And then she's inviting you back for a podcast as well. So,
yep.
Yeah. Right. So let's jump in tonight. And real quick, next week we're starting.
We have the wrong title.
We do. Let's see here.
Hold.
Okay, but no, go ahead and talk.
So what we're going to start, the series we're talking about beginning tonight is faith and mental health. And we just realized that we had the title wrong. And so Polly's fixing that quickly, which is what we do. We do this on the fly. So
I am not putting a description right now. Okay.
So our series on faith and mental health is going to be, we don't know how long, as we often don't. As we near the end, we'll let you guys know. But some of you guys know I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've been a licensed counselor since 1993. And so I guess the licensing itself will be 20 years. 30 years. Oh, my word. 30 years next year. But I've been in practice since 1991 before my license was finished. I was working on my clinical hours. And so having worked that long in the field of clinical counseling, but at the same time, always having the emphasis on the pathway, the journey to freedom, I've spent 30 years trying to figure out how to integrate and marry those two ideas between faith and mental health. And hence the birth of Think Differently Counseling, Think Differently Academy, and the Think Differently model, which you'll hear us talk about some tonight. And for those who are doing the Think Differently certification, you'll have an intensive opportunity to learn about the Think Differently model and learn how to practice it. But because of that, we want to do a series on faith and mental health. And tonight I want to talk about just some conceptual things that are so crucial to me, because there's a lot of like at the core, there's a pure integration between the world of faith and the world of not just mental health, but sound clinical practice. I think there's ditches on both sides of that kind of pure core. And so I want to talk about some of the ditches a little bit tonight, but I want to talk about it from the perspective of helping us build towards the future of this series. In other words, specifically what I want to talk about is the importance of understanding and integrating not just the language of faith and mental health, but the model, or a model, which is congruent both with the gospel as we understand it from a biblical perspective, and sound practice of mental health care at every level, and ways then to implement that. So let me talk about what I mean by model. And again, for many of you guys, that's probably an incredibly familiar word, so I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence, but I just think it's important that at a meta level, kind of an overview level, that we understand to practice really good counseling, it's important to have an overarching model that says to us a couple key things. And specifically, what is it that makes humans human? What is it that makes humans stuck or suffer? What run into the issues that people come to counseling for? What is it that brings about change? And then what does mental health look like? And so we move from kind of the symptom area where, there's some kind of problem in the way, and we have some theory about how to sit down with somebody and move from, here's the problem you have, here's how we understand the makeup of the human soul and the the engine of change, if you will. And we put those two things together, the human soul that's stuck in some way through the process of change to end up with someone who's healthy. So some definition of what's healthy, some definition of the makeup of the soul and the process to move from either wounded or broken or lost or trapped, or however you want to conceptualize that. We'll talk tonight about how we conceptualize that, and then the process of moving people from here to there. So to be a counselor, it's crucial to have that kind of model, because it gives you a beginning point and it gives you a whole series of techniques and tools and strategies that, if those techniques, tools, and strategies fit under the umbrella of your model, then you can help move people from wherever they present to you with their symptoms to a place of health. Polly, even as a coach, really, you have the same thing happening, that you have a model for how people are constructed, and you have strategies and techniques to help them move from wherever they're stuck to change in mental health.
Yes.
And so those are the kind of things that a model is made of. Is what's the human soul consist of? How's it wired together? Where do problems come from? What constitutes the movement towards change? And then what constitutes a healthy soul or a healthy person? So that's a real oversimplification, but you can see what a meta level it is. We call it a model because within that model, then we can move the parts and we can understand how to operate. We know how to take the symptoms that present and then bring them to us. Now, here's the dilemma. On one side of the issue, one side of the pure core, where our beliefs in Jesus and our model for counseling integrate, on one side, there's a tendency to just take any model of counseling and put biblical language on it. And I don't just mean King James language. I mean, use the language of Scripture, use the language of, talking about what the Bible says. It's one of the mistakes I think people make is they take any old model and they apply, you can hear my bias already, and just any old model, just any old model. And putting Christian language on it doesn't necessarily make it a Christian model. In the same way, by the way, it's also true that there's a lot of religion that doesn't necessarily constitute a Christian model the way that we would understand it from the Bible, and the way that we would teach it from the Bible, and the way that we practice it from the Bible. Let me be specific about that. One of the things you'll hear us talk about, not only tonight, but throughout this series, is this idea that what is it that moves change? What's the engine of change? If something's not as it should be, and we're going to move it to be as it should be, there's some way we think about how change happens. And to the degree that the model of change depends on information and willpower, that's a humanistic belief, right? In other words, it depends on my ability to know and my ability to gut up and make change. And so, for instance, any model of counseling that relies on information and willpower to produce change, that's a model that we would consider humanism. Again, not good or bad, just humanism. The dilemma then, though, with humanistic models, I just realized.
There's a doggo.
She's literally pinned between my feet. The dilemma with humanistic models is they're simply not congruent with the model of Christianity that we see in the New Testament. The model of Christianity, and we'll talk about how change it happens through that model. But so you can even follow religions whose beliefs are, or even Christian counseling models whose beliefs are, if you have the right information and exercise enough willpower, you can produce change. And that model, regardless of whether you call that discipleship or counseling or whatever you might call that, that model is still humanism. And so if you have come from a stream or are in a stream of Christianity where the primary model of change is giving you information and expecting you to apply your willpower to bring about change, that's not congruent with how we understand the death and resurrection of Jesus and the advent of the Holy Spirit. And so that's part of the understanding of a model, is that a model has to know how to move people towards change. So on one side, the dilemma that people have is they take any model at all and they just use biblical or Christian-like language, Christianese, to make it sound like it's a biblical model. It happens in both religion and in counseling. On the other side of the dilemma is that we don't even that we have a model that itself isn't congruent with Christianity, and we call it a Christian model, even though it's not built the same way that salvation and sanctification is.
Right.
So maybe I should talk about that for a couple of minutes. And you've got to see how crucial this is to really integrating.
So will you go ahead, finish quick.
Yeah, to really integrating faith and mental health, because we're not simply saying, be mentally healthy and bring your faith into it. We're talking about, what does your faith life have to do with mental health, and what does mental health have to do with the cross and the resurrection? That's
what I was just about to ask, is like, why is this important to talk about?
Yeah. Well, it's in our world, it's not just our livelihood, it's our livelihood because we believe it to our core and we live it.
Yes.
I'm not the person that you would have known at age 14 because of what happened at age 16 when I was born again. And the years that ensued that, where I began to understand transformation the way that we'll talk about tonight, those things changed me at a fundamental level, and gave me things that I didn't bring into the world with me, and gave me perspectives and understanding that I didn't bring into the world with me. And so, and it's crucial to understand for a couple of reasons. You can also run into people who are going to present as if they've got Christian counseling, but what they have is what we would call the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what might more popularly be called legalism, and that is knowledge and willpower as a pathway to transformation.
Yes.
So when people present knowledge and willpower, but call it Christian, I would strongly urge you to step back and just ask yourself the question, does this fit with the conversation that you heard here tonight? Or does this fit with the necessity of the death and resurrection of Jesus and the advent of the Holy Spirit? You'll hear me use that phrase a number of different times, and I'm about to explain why. So here's what we believe. I'm going to talk about what we believe. Now, this is central to the Think Differently model, which is a combination of the freedom model that I developed for 20 years, starting in the early 90s. Oh, I guess now it's 30 years, right? So 30 years, starting in the early 90s, because it's always in development.
Keep adding.
So that freedom model that I spent all those decades developing, a school of thought called neurolinguistic programming, and then family systems, which is my formal training, my formal education as a marriage and family therapist. We integrate those three models and believe that all three of them are incredibly congruent with then this model we're about to describe, which I think is the gospel. So here's, in a nutshell, it's going to be this. Mankind was created as a conduit through which God could, through which we could both receive, contain, and broadcast the breath of God. That we as humans were supposed to represent God on the earth. While God existed and ran the heavens, it was our job to run the earth. And so our place is to receive from God, contain God, and breathe out God into the world. That then makes us who we are, identity being another key to this whole process. And that process in the garden kept us whole and healthy, from God to us, through us. That way of living from the Spirit of God, or the breath of God, from God to us and through us, that made us who we are and kept our mind and our soul integrated with the person of God. We contained his breath, and so our thoughts were processed spiritually as well as materially. Our emotions processed spiritually as well as materially, and our bodies were physical bodies that contained spirit. And all that was the design that was severed in Genesis 3. And when it was severed in Genesis 3, we maintained the body that we came into the world with, and we maintained the soul, mind, will, and emotions, but the spirit was separated. And so we began to live, instead of receive, contain, broadcast, we began to live what I call consider, decide, initiate. I reason it out, I think through the process, I make a decision, and through my willpower, I initiate. Receive, contain, broadcast comes from God. Consider, decide, initiate comes from me. Now what happens then is my mind, my will, and my emotions become the driver in my life instead of a conduit. Prior to the fall, God's Spirit was the driver, and it drove through the conduit of my mind, my will, and my emotions, and it kept me who I am, and it kept me healthy emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally. Removing the spirit from that equation leaves man and woman, all of us, empty on the inside, but still functioning mentally, emotionally, relationally, behaviorally, still functioning with our will. And that becomes the driver. And from that, Carl Jung says that most mental illness comes from humans' attempt to avoid real, legitimate pain.
Yeah.
So rather than face the pain of the fall, Adam and Eve began to build a false self. The knowledge of good and evil combined with the human-initiated drive, knowledge of good and evil being a way of thinking that they switched from the tree of life to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. From the knowledge of good and evil, they began to construct what they thought they were supposed to have. Mm-hmm. I'm going to move from quoting Carl Jung to quoting Thor.
Perfect.
In the movie Endgame, Thor visits his mother. Thor, of course, being the Norse god of thunder, who's a perfect person to quote when you're talking about Christianity.
Of course.
But his mother makes the comment to him. She says, everyone fails at who they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And her comment really is saying, when you try to portray something instead of be someone, you're always going to fail, because everyone succeeds at being themselves. But when you wrap something else around your truest self, then that something else becomes what you present to the world and what you believe about yourself. Mm-hmm. And that, so Carl Jung is saying the pain of emptiness, the legitimate pain of grief, the legitimate pains of life, when we try to avoid that, we develop all kinds of symptomatic responses to that. Mm-hmm. Everything from physiological responses to mental and biochemical responses, and then relational responses. And so Jung's quote that much mental illness comes from humans' attempt to avoid real pain. He's simply saying we develop so many unhealthy coping strategies that the original issue of pain is not near as bad as the many coping strategies that we developed to deal with that original strategy of pain. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about the fact that this has gone on for centuries and all. So it's no longer just about responding to pain. The world is in decay, and as a result, the human race is in decay. And so we see physiology. We see the generation after generation. We see that even bodies are born misshapen, and bodies are born with defects that come through the line of a fallen mm-hmm. world and a fallen race. And so we see that the fallenness that began in the garden, the soul empty the spirit, continued generation after generation after generation. So the kind of things that we face in the mental health world today, some of them have a genesis in an attempt to avoid pain, mm-hmm. but some of them have a genesis in generation after generation after generation of mental, physical, emotional, relational, spiritual distortions mm-hmm. that have been broadcast through multiple generations into our present world. I hope that makes some sense. Mm-hmm. But the model that I want you to get is that the soul empty the spirit causes the human soul to become self-sustaining and self-generating. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we develop a false version of ourselves. And sometimes that false version is working hard to be good. And sometimes that false version is working hard at being bad. And so we have the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil. Mm-hmm. Either or both can be expressed through us, but ultimately it's our attempt to portray something rather than to simply allow something to be. Yeah. That's the result of the fall. Multiply that through the generations. The solution then wasn't for somebody to come and say, hey, stop doing that bad thing, mm-hmm. because your willpower should get you to turn around. Mm-hmm. The solution was for Jesus to come and offer again the reconnection to the breath of life. How many times did he say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. And again, he offers, what did he say to the woman at the well? If you knew me, you'd ask for living water and you'd drink from it and never be thirsty again. Jesus offered humans not a path correction of behavior or even attitude, but he offered again the switch back from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, back again to the tree of life, so that an empty soul could again be connected to and become a conduit so it could receive, contain, and broadcast the breath and person of God. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the dilemma. If I've been empty, let's say, so I was born again at 16, 14 really, but somewhere in those years. I'd spent 14 years living empty and creating my own version of me. And my version of me had all kinds of weaknesses and frailties and impulses and drives and defenses and all those different things. So two things happen when I'm born again. One of them is I don't know yet that there's another way to change. Yeah. So I'm born again and the breath of God comes to me, but I'm still trying to manufacture what I think I should do in response to the breath of God coming in. So I haven't even yet changed my way. I still have my old way, even though I have a new resident inside. I have the Spirit of God now living inside of me. Somewhere along the way, we have to learn that you can't produce through effort that which is designed to be released through surrender. Mm-hmm. Or what I mean by that is you can't work up something that's a natural response to surrendering to the move of God through you. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is I also had 14 to 16 years of emotional injury, pain, circumstances, beliefs, all the things that happened in my life. And all those 14 to 16 years of programming to my soul don't deprogram right away. Mm-mm. In fact, I'm 60 and I'm still deprogramming several of them. And so the model of Christianity as we would teach it is the human soul was empty. Jesus offered the opportunity to reconnect to him, fill up the soul again. But we've got to do two things. We've got to think differently, mm-hmm. which is why we're Think Differently Academy. But what I mean by that is change the way that our mind operates so that instead of working hard to produce change out of effort, we learn to surrender to the move and the flow of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And then as we learn to surrender to the move and flow of the Spirit, we let the Spirit begin to operate to heal broken places and restore things that have been taken from me and convince me of lies that I've believed in very deep places. And that is then our model of the human soul, what's broken, what change. We didn't talk about what makes change happen except the restoration of the tree of life. Mm-hmm. And then the process of transformation and change. So when we develop the Think Differently model and use those three models I talked about, the freedom model, which is all about that whole idea of the restoration of the Spirit of God inside of us and his outworking through us as he changes us from the inside out, which is what it means when they say work out your salvation in fear and trembling. It doesn't mean you try to work it out. It means work out from the inside that which is already present inside of you. But so the Think Differently model is the freedom model, which is about that. Family systems, which is if I'm believing lies, I build those lies in the relationships around me. Mm-hmm. And the relationships around me are part of why I believe the lies that I believe. Mm-hmm. That, I always say, your parents can push your buttons because they're the ones who installed them. Actually, I'm quoting somebody else. So Helen Hunt said that.
Thank you, Helen.
Great philosopher and actress. But so the family systems part is the world outside me is a recreation of the world inside me. And if we don't change our life patterns, we can try to change us, but our life patterns want to teach us again to conform mm-hmm. to the way we were when we formed those patterns in the first place. And then we use neurolinguistic programming because it helps us really zero in on identity and remove the beliefs that keep people from becoming who they're created to be.
It changes the lens in which you see life.
And self and experiences. And so that would be our model of transformation based on what we understand and how we teach and translate the scriptures. And so you can see that it's essential that a counseling model, to be a faith-oriented counseling model, needs to be consistent with that idea of something's missing from the inside, or if you're born again, then it's in there, but it's trying to work its way out through all the muck. Use the example you talked about at dinner.
Yeah. So we were talking about just kind of class tonight and things like that. And when we were talking about models, I talked a little bit about my counselor, and she is an EMDR therapist. And I'm not sure if she is a Christian or not. And
she doesn't market herself.
She doesn't market herself as a Christian. She doesn't speak Christianese. However, she very much honors me and my beliefs. And however, her model of what she does is all about transformation and about identity and removing the false version that I have built up for so long to protect myself, the EMDR that she does, and very gifted at what she does, helps transform and heal me, because that is her model. And so she has a very good picture of the whole family system. And then she also, integrates the EMDR, which is rewiring my brain, and putting, like, healing the nervous system and the neural pathways that trauma created. And so the breakthroughs that have happened have, just because she is not Christian, she still, what was the phrase I said? I can't remember the thing that I said, but she's not Christian. However, she was certainly an instrument.
Change. Yeah, she was an instrument of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you'll hear us talk about is the restoration of original design, mm-hmm. right? To restore back to the human soul the original design from the garden.
Yeah.
And to do so in such a way that releases our God-created identity. Mm-hmm. And I think, you and I would both say that what we've seen with EMDR for you, mm-hmm. is that you've been able to be, what you said just recently, I feel more myself than I've ever felt in my life before.
Ever felt. Like, and there have been things that the will had, like, there's been healing within the EMDR process, but then there are things that my will also had to do. Like, there are things that I needed to say and verbalize, because I was taught with trauma, you don't talk. Mm. And if you do, it needs to be in alignment with everybody else around you. Mm. And so I learned how to have a voice, but I had to use my will for that. But it came from a place of identity, that then I could use the will in alignment with the way God created me to be able to have a voice. It's pretty powerful. And so just saying, like, well, I'm a Christian, I have to see a Christian counselor. Why?
If you see a Christian counselor who uses information, mm-hmm. and willpower as the engine of change, then you're not really seeing a Christian counselor.
Right.
If they say that they're a biblical counselor, mm-hmm. and what they mean is they're going to give you biblical information and expect you to apply willpower to bring about change, that's not really what Jesus' death and resurrection, mm-hmm. was designed to bring about.
Yeah.
I said this on Twitter a couple days ago, and I want to repeat it here as we start to move towards landing. And that is that my concern is that there's a number of people in the discipleship space who still think that education is more important than restoration. That's not exactly how I said it, but essentially saying that there's been a model of discipleship that says if we give people the information that they need to know, they should be able to become who they are supposed to be. And the whole idea is that we all fail at who we're supposed to be. And to me, if you watch how Jesus discipled his followers, you saw him restore broken souls, mm-hmm. not educate stupid people. He wasn't trying to give them information so they could do better. He was fixing what was broken inside of them so that they could be loosed to be who they were, created in the image of God. Mm-hmm. And I think that what we've seen for far too long in the discipleship space is an education model which only provides information with either the implication or the direct statement that the next natural step is to utilize willpower. We are strong advocates for this idea that discipleship is really about the restoration of wounded, broken, or deceived souls, so that people who are operating out of pain, a lot of times people act disobedient, not because they're rebellious, but because they're injured. Mm-hmm. And I often say, people, there's a number of reasons why people don't follow on a path, and only one of them is resistance. Sometimes it's injury. Mm-hmm. And so we are firm believers that people who find wholeness live that wholeness out. And the model of Jesus' work in the lives of his followers, not only in the first century, but still in this day today, is the restoration of that which was stolen, the healing of that which was wounded, the repair of that which was broken, or if we just want to use the opening the blind eyes, releasing the captives, healing the broken heart, and unleashing the prisoners. Those are the things that Jesus did. He didn't say, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and I'm here to educate the stupid, and I'm here to motivate the lazy, and I'm here to, try to get people to try harder. He said, I came to heal and restore and release. And so what we're after is models of therapy, and in some cases, just straight up techniques, but they ought to fit within the model, but models of therapy that are congruent with a model that says the human soul needs a spiritual connection. It's the things that are in the way of that spiritual connection that either need to be moved out of the way so the connection can happen, or the connection's happened and there are beliefs and wounds and broken places that get in the way of the release of identity. At the core of our conversation about faith and mental health is the idea that if, as Jung said, a lot of our mental health struggles are our attempts to avoid legitimate pain, that in two things. Number one, Jesus carried a lot of our legitimate pain for us to give us back access to a spiritual life. But also there are certain things we have to face that may be legitimate painful things. Rather than walk around the pain and avoid it, we walk into it and find that Jesus meets us in our pain. Those kind of things give us a chance to do away with false self and rediscover our truest identity, the person that Jesus died for. So you'll hear me say the death, the resurrection of Jesus, and the advent of the Holy Spirit. And what I mean by that is Jesus died to show us how to die, came back to life to put new life inside of us, show us how to die. That's not complete. I know someone's going to say that's not the whole thing. Jesus died first so that we could also die. But he came back to life so that he could come back to life in us. And the advent of the Holy Spirit is the restoration of the receive, contain, broadcast process. Our counseling model and a number of other counseling techniques really allow those kind of things, especially when we talk about repair instead of motivate. When the nervous system is harmed, when the brain, when we're functioning out of parts of our brain that were never designed to function out of, then the renewing of the mind is a very logical and deeply spiritual process. So that's what's ahead in the conversation, is talking through now that we've kind of talked through the model part of it, we're going to talk through where we see that integrate into practice. And we'll continue to help you guys look for, what do you look for to know you're getting a spiritual model? What do you look for to know you're getting a humanistic model? And what's your part? What's God's part? What's a counselor's part?
I think we'll get to practice some of it too, because I am very much, hey, let's do this thing. Let's see what God says about this for each one of us, because you are created unique and beautiful. And there's something inside of you that is not inside of me or in Bob. And a lot of times we end up hiding it for a really long time. So it's that place of going, and we, a lot of times we don't even know we're hiding it because of pain. And so we'll get to try some stuff too, to find that unique place in you.
I'm going to quickly say, if you're a licensed counselor, coach, pastor, someone who facilitates this kind of change in people's lives, we start formally just Monday, the 14th of February, 2022, our second round of online training in order to use our model, where we teach this model in depth and teach you the techniques and strategies that we use. If you're watching this after February 14th of 2022, get a hold of us and we'll let you know when the next training comes around. And so we really, this is kind of at the core of what we do. It's teaching other people to do this for the people that they're designed to help. And so there's still a few days left. Our current class of trainees has received the videos to watch. But we had someone last year sign up 20 minutes before we started, and they were able to catch up. And by the way, they did amazingly. And so if you're interested in that training, look down at the bottom of the Think Differently Academy page, click on training and certification.
I also put it in the comments. I think it goes to YouTube and Facebook.
Okay. So click on that, watch the webinar. There's a couple that we interview who did that training, husband and wife, and they both work at a church together and had done freedom training before. And get their feedback about how this training is different and took them further than that. Meantime, we look forward to these Tuesday nights. We're going to take some time to dig deep with this. And like Polly said, She'll help me remember to take some time to practice.
I got y'all.
In the meantime, we will see you guys next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we've got 2 weeks after tonight to still be on Facebook and on YouTube, after which we're only going to be on the Think Differently Academy.
That's right. So we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a fantastic week and great evening and day, Miss Beth. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you guys soon.
Bye-bye.